Hi, good evening, everybody. You're talking to Catherine from KISS, Keto, It's Simple for Success. For those of you watching on the replay, welcome. Sorry you couldn't catch me earlier, but really glad that you're with me now. We've got loads and loads to go through tonight. I love doing these live Q&As. I've got loads of questions to crack on with, but I would love that if you are watching this evening or this afternoon, if you're in the US, that you say hello, let me know where you're coming from in the world, and just let me know that you're there. If you've got any questions as we go through, then please feel free to drop them in the comments. I can see them as we're going along, and I'll happily answer them as we go. So we're going to kick off this evening's Q&A with a question that I get asked a lot, or I don't get asked this question, but ultimately the issue that the person's talking about is answered by this. It's how do we know whether we're eating enough fat, or you know, how much fat should we actually be eating? And that's a big question that comes up. I hear a lot of people who are struggling with low energy, not enough weight loss, they're struggling with hunger, cravings, that sort of thing. And lots of these are really good indications that actually there's just not enough fat in the diet. And when we're living a ketogenic lifestyle, one of the main things that we need in our life and in our diet is the fat. There's no such thing as low-fat keto. It doesn't exist, no matter what anybody else tells you. Fat's really important. So how do we know what is enough fat? Well, first of all, a ketogenic lifestyle, we're looking to have around 75, if not more, % of our calorific intake from fat. Now, calories in fat, there's 9 per gram, so fat is quite calorific. So it's quite difficult to understand, I guess, that when we're looking in terms of quantities, it's very similar to the protein that we take. However, there's a lot more calories in fat, and a lot of our energy on a ketogenic diet should be coming from fat. So how do we know when enough is enough? Well, the first thing that we need to look at is our hunger. If we're not eating carbohydrates and we're not fueling the body with sugars and carbs, then the body will need fuel, and it will crave and seek fuel by being hungry and by craving food if you're not providing it with adequate fuel. So that would be the first thing. If you're eating a good meal, but not long after that meal you are hungry, that's an indication that overall there's not enough fuel in your diet. So definitely, if you're still hungry, but you know there's no residual carbs, there's no residual sweeteners or processed food that would spark cravings, that hunger should be listened to. Your body is hungry, and what we do in order to fuel our bodies when we're on a ketogenic diet is eat fat. So that's a good indication that you may need to increase the amount of fat in your diet. So how do we know when we've got to the point where it's enough? You know, can we eat too much fat? This is a really good and important question. Well, firstly, it's very difficult to overeat fat. Once we're through the period of cravings, we've removed all the sugars, the carbohydrates, and the sweeteners from our diet. After that, our appetite does begin to be suppressed. And if you put on top of that, fat is very satiating, it does actually become quite difficult to overeat fat. So it's sort of self-regulating in a way, in that we get so full on fat when our appetite is suppressed that actually we just don't end up overeating, and the body self-regulates when we've dropped the carbohydrates and when we've ditched the sweeteners out of the diet. So they're the two big things really to understand. So what does enough fat look like? Well, obviously that's going to depend on your personal energy requirement and where you are in the process of transitioning over onto a ketogenic lifestyle. For example, if you're only just starting, then your body is going to be really seeking energy. It's very used to running on carbohydrates. And once you start lowering the amount of blood sugar, and once you start actually depleting the amount of glycogen in the body, then your body is going to start to panic a little bit and start looking for food. So your hunger is going to be much higher when you first start the ketogenic diet than it will be in a month's time or 2 months' time. So at that point, it's absolutely fine and in fact encouraged to follow that hunger. Make sure that you're providing the body with enough fuel so that it doesn't panic and it gets the hint and starts to burn fat as fuel. Basically, it helps your body to release fat from its cells because it understands that there's still plenty of food in the environment and it doesn't have to go into starvation mode and start holding on to all its fat stores and everything else. So eating to hunger, and it may feel like a lot of food, and it definitely is. When I go into ketosis, I go up over the 3,000 calories a day. It's a lot of food, but it's fine. Don't worry about it. It will be temporary, because what happens when you enter that ketogenic state, and certainly after a few weeks of being in ketosis, your appetite will suppress. You will naturally want to eat less. So for now, if you're early on in the process, then make sure that you are fueling your body and going with those hunger cues. But it only works, you can only completely moderate the calorific intake that you're taking in once carbs, once sweeteners, and once that processed food is gone. There's things in processed food like MSG and things like that which completely stop your ability to self-regulate what you eat. It will make you overeat. If anyone's ever had Chinese food, an hour later they're back in the dish eating more Chinese food, that's because of MSG. Sweeteners, very similar. The way they work in the brain is they encourage us to eat the sweet food and eat more of it to gorge on it and to gain weight. It's a survival mechanism, and we need to be very aware of that. Hi, Cheryl. So is it okay to eat less? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got to go with your body. Ultimately, we want to maintain, we'll talk a little bit later, we want to maintain a reasonable number of calories because we're looking to protect our metabolism, protect our thyroid, our hair, our nails. So we do want to feed ourselves, but naturally we will start to eat less. However, we still want that high fat proportion of our diet, because if we're not eating high fat, then where are these calories coming from? Well, the only options when you take away fat is protein and carbohydrate. They're the two things. Now, we don't want to eat carbs because we know they make us fat, and we don't want to overeat protein either. So we're always going to have a high proportion of fat in a ketogenic lifestyle. That's the way it is. That's the way it has to be. So you're not going to reduce the amount of fat in the meal, but your meals may become smaller. So it's just listening to the body, but understanding that for as long as you eat keto, it will always be that high proportion of healthy fat, because there is no, like I said, there's no low fat version of keto. The only options if you're not eating that high amount of fat is to up the number of calories from protein or carbs. Now, both of those have potential negative impacts. So we do keep the fat in the diet. However, what you'll notice is people go from eating 3 or 4 meals a day plus snacks and still looking for food, and dropping slowly down until they're just eating a couple of meals a day and feeling really, really satisfied at that level. They're still eating a substantial number of calories because fat is high in calories. However, the number of meals, the quantity does start to naturally decrease as you go into that sort of fat adaptation stage. So hopefully that's answered the question then. Okay, so what does a meal look like in terms of fat then? Well, for me, I always start by buying fatty protein. I'm always looking to find protein that is already a source of natural fat. Obviously, the best type would be your oily fish, but really good quality meats, your pork, your beef, your chicken thighs, your dark meat on turkeys, lots of different meats, but we're looking for that high fat content. So always look for marbling, or that it's got its skin on, or it's got that layer of fat. But that's always the starting point for me. I buy high fat meats, high fat protein. So that's my starting point. The next thing I do is I add fat when I'm cooking. So if we're going to be using high heats, make sure you're using stable fats. Things like lard, coconut oil are the most stable fats at high temperatures. So if you're frying, then definitely think about beef tallow, lard, ghee. The saturated fats really are what you want to be cooking in. Then once you've cooked the food, I'm always looking then for my last bit of added fat, then either a dressing on my salad or a little bit of sauce for my meat, or I'm looking for a bit of butter on my vegetables and things like that. So we're starting off with fat on our protein, then we're cooking in fat or adding some sort of fatty sauce or something else. Now, what we're doing then is we're judging our eating by how we're feeling. And if we're 8 hours after that meal still feeling comfortable, then that was an absolutely fantastic meal and it had adequate fat. If you're feeling after 3 hours that you're starving hungry, then you need to start adding a little bit more. So we can add more protein and we can add more fat when we begin, but like I said, we can allow our bodies to go with it, and we can boost our metabolism and heal our metabolism early on by eating the food, by eating the calories, and then naturally the amount of food that you are eating will reduce. Okay. So I'll move along then. If you've got any other questions about fat, quantities of fat, or how to know that you're getting enough fat, then drop them in the comments and I will answer them. Okie dokie, moving along then. We talked a bit about overeating on KISS. It's very difficult to overeat. Once you've got rid of the appetite stimulants in the diet, your carbohydrates, your processed food and your sweeteners, the natural appetite suppression that you get off ketosis makes it quite difficult to overeat. If you're eating the foods that I've put in the KISS lists, your meat, your veg, your fat, your dairy, your nuts and seeds, nothing in those things is going to be overstimulating the appetite. So once you're eating those things and you're eating to hunger and you're using things like your energy level and how you feel to judge whether or not you're getting enough food, then it is very, very difficult to actually overeat, particularly if you start to use things like intermittent fasting and things like that. Very difficult to overeat. So you can trust your own cues. Hi. Hi guys, thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to have you here. So we were just talking about overeating, and that brings me on to macros. So for those people who don't know what macros are, if you've been anywhere around the ketogenic community for any period of time, you've probably heard the word. It's shortened from macronutrients. What it is the term used to describe fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, the three main macronutrients that are in the diet. Now, there are a lot of people who believe that counting the amount of protein, fat, and carbohydrate you eat every day, and also counting the number of calories that you eat in a day can be really helpful when you're doing a ketogenic diet. That may be the case for a lot of people. However, it wasn't sustainable for myself. I found it really, really annoying to do. I've downloaded 4 different apps to give them all a try. And, I was very, very soon into that little experiment that I realized that actually I was pretty much spot on anyway, because I was eating instinctively, and like we've just talked about, once you remove the appetite stimulant from the diet, you do naturally eat what your body wants. Our bodies are actually very well designed to be healthy. We just got to make sure that we're providing it with the correct fuel, and when we give it the correct fuel, it will run correctly and it will be healthy. So that's what I found. My other issue with the trackers is it does take away the focus from the quality of the food, because anyone who's been in KISS for any amount of time will realize it's not the amount of food that we're eating necessarily, it's actually what food we're eating, and how that's impacting the body. What food we eat will depend on whether that particular calorie is stored or burned, for example, and it will make a big difference to our health. So it's all well and good understanding exactly how many carbs you eat a day and how many grams of protein and how many grams of fat. But what actually makes a difference is what you are eating. So that's another reason that I'm not 100% keen on macro calculators. The last reason that I don't use one and I don't recommend them to people is a lot of them suggest a calorie deficit. So I'm just going to have a quick glug of water because I've gone all dry. Yeah, macros with young kids. Who can do that? Okay. Yeah. So, like Sherry says, they're all going to give you different things. Some of the calculators that I've had did actually recommend for me to lose weight, and I did this quite recently, so I didn't have a vast amount of weight to lose, but it suggested me eating 1,200 calories per day, broken down then into 75% fat, etc., etc. Now, I eat a lot more than 1,200 calories a day. In fact, I've probably had one meal that is 1,200 calories. So that level would, first of all, yes, I would drop weight. It's physics. However, the body is very, very clever. And what my body would do if I ate 1,200 calories a day is it would compensate for that. It would assume that I was in either starving or that the food supply around me was scarce. So what it would do in order to protect my body and to keep as much of my body weight and my life-saving fat stores, which is how the body sees it, it would drop my metabolic rate. So what would happen is my body would cool down, I would be colder, a lot of my non-essential functions would stop. Things like hair growth, my hair might start falling out, I might start getting brittle nails, my skin may not be as healthy as it is. So lots of those things would start to happen because my body would try to conserve energy, it would drop my metabolism, it may affect my cycle and things like that. That's the sort of thing that would happen. So yes, I would lose weight initially, but then once my basal metabolic rate dropped down, I would plateau, I would stop losing weight, and then my only option, I guess, after that would be to drop my calories again. Where to next, So that's another reason I'm not a fan of any of the apps that suggest that we need to drop our calories in order to lose weight, because that just simply isn't the case. So in terms of macros, they are important, but what's more important is the food that we're putting in our body. It's far more important that we're worrying about the fact that our food is clean, that our food is high fat, that it's a good source of protein, that it's got good micronutrients, that it's going to fuel our body. That's so much more important than how many carbs it's got. I totally get that people don't want to get kicked out of ketosis, but if you do follow the lists in the KISS plan, in the group files, nothing in there will kick you out of ketosis. I've done this for you. This is so that you can go in there and do your shopping list and come home with nothing that's going to impact you at all. And I think that's the most important thing. Once you understand which foods are good for the body, which foods keep you in ketosis, then as long as you have them on hand, you're free to eat and follow those natural feeding cues and that natural hunger. Okie dokie. Yeah, absolutely, Cheryl. I've done both. I've tested it out, but I am, I'm not one for, I mean, I think to make it work properly, you actually have to log the food before you eat it, because I've had meals and then logged it and gone, whoops, and it's too late then. So I guess you've got to plan in advance exactly how much you're going to eat, and log it before you eat it. And to be honest, I don't live in that world. I just don't have time. And most of us are on quite a long journey. It took me over a year to lose all the weight that I wanted to lose. That's a long time, and I can't imagine having consistently used any type of app or tracking or counting for that amount of time. I had to find something that was more sustainable for my lifestyle than doing that. And for me, it was just getting to know and being familiar with ketogenic food, and with being familiar with what my body needs. And once you've got that sort of knowledge, it's just a matter of doing a shopping list and going out and doing it. So yeah. That's me in macros. So yes, a lot of people find it reassuring to understand carbs, protein and fat. However, that is just the tip of the iceberg. Not all carbs are the same, not all fat is the same, not all protein is the same. This is so much more complex. The body does not use all carbs the same. The body doesn't use all calories the same. Fat isn't stored in the same way as carbs are. It's complex. So yeah, macros oversimplify and take up most of your day. So that's why they're not here in this group. Okay, moving along. So let's talk about plateaus, weight plateaus. That definitely came up for a couple of people who were interested in chatting about that. Now, firstly, nobody loses weight consistently day after day after day. That's just simply not how it works physiologically. So first of all, to describe the physiological thing, you've got a fat cell, okay? A lipocyte, they're called. Now, when we're overweight and when those lipocytes are full of fat, they're quite rigid and quite large. So the first thing that happens when we start a ketogenic diet is we get rid of all the circulating blood glucose. We start digging into our stored glycogen, which is in our liver and in our muscles. And then once all that glycogen is gone, we still have that energy need. So now we have to start releasing fat from our fat cells to burn as fuel. So if you can imagine, then you've got this big old fat cell. Now we're going to take some of the fat out of that fat cell and it's going to shrink down. Okay. Now we're going to use this fat as energy, and we've turned it into ketone bodies, and we're burning them for fuel. Now our body likes to be fat, unfortunately, because it's a survival mechanism. And when we have that body fat, we can last for months and months and months without food. So very important that we continue to be fat according to our body. So it wants to protect this cell. So what it's going to do to stop that cell collapsing and dying off is actually going to refill it with water. So that's the first thing it does. It's released all the fat cells out, but it's now going to fill it with water. And water is actually denser than fat, so it's going to be slightly heavier as well, that cell now. So as you can imagine, when we had that fat and now it's full of water, we haven't lost any weight, yet we have burnt that fat. So we're going to have a period of time where we're not losing weight. We're burning off the fat in the cells, but the cells are refilling with water. It's not until some period after this, and this is it's individual as to how long this takes, but after a time, the body is going to realize, I don't need this cell anymore. This cell is just full of water. And particularly if we're doing things like fasting, and we're using autophagy and techniques like, and it's not a technique, it's a process of the body. We're using processes in the body to actually get rid of inefficient cells. A lipocyte with no fat in it will be broken down. Okay, and it's that point you get what some people call a whoosh, or you notice some weight loss, because suddenly that water has been released from the cell has collapsed and broken down, and that fat cell is now gone. So it's not a direct line when you lose weight. It's more like a stepped pattern. Okay, so you burn the fat, but the cells refill, and then you keep going and keep going with keto and your intermittent fasting, and then the cells collapse, and then you go down in weight, but then you plateau again. So first of all, plateaus are perfectly normal, and usually everyone just needs a little bit of reassurance that weight loss is not a consistent drop. There are plateaus, and every individual body is going to be very, very different. Now, the way that we can make these plateaus shorter would be things like fasting, intermittent fasting particularly, but also looking to remove any inflammatory foods from the body. The things that I'm always quite interested in are things like any processed foods, any sweeteners. I know everyone has a go at me about my issues with sweeteners, but this is just from personal experience and also from helping other people. You may have, for example, tiny amounts of grain left in the diet. If you're eating processed food and there's a little bit of starch left, there's a little bit of wheat flour left in those products, then you're going to be holding on to water. You're also going to be impacting the gut microbiome and things like that. So that's one of the things that I would look for. I would remove anything from the diet that potentially is causing inflammation. The other thing, I would look at whether there's enough fat and fuel in the body. Is there enough calories to actually allow your metabolism to speed up? Because that's what we want to do. We want to be, rapidly burning fat. So we're looking at things like lean body mass. We're looking at metabolism and quantities of calories. We're looking at quantities of fat. Is our body reassured enough that there's enough food in the environment? Because that's really, really key as well. But ultimately, I think the one tool that will break a plateau quicker than anything would be fasting. Not only does fasting obviously burn body fat because there's no dietary fat going in, it greatly reduces the amount of insulin, and insulin is our body's fat storage hormone, so that will go as well. But also what fasting will do is increase autophagy, so we will start to break down inefficient cells in the body, and that's really, really important when we're trying to lose weight. And also it will stimulate things like human growth hormone, which is fantastic for actually producing lean mass. And it's the lean mass in our body that's burning the fat. We need to have an engine in order to fuel it. So it's increasing lean mass. So I think that for those people who haven't looked into fasting before, it's sometimes an intimidating thought. However, if you're deeply in ketosis and happily going a long time without food anyway, because of that ketogenic state, then fasting could be something that you use as a tool to push you forward in your goal, and it's definitely something we could do. Thanks, Sherry. Okie dokie. So I'll move forward then, and hopefully you understand plateaus a little bit more. I would say that unless you haven't altered in body weight for a month, it may not be a plateau. It may be your body getting ready to collapse those cells. However, like we said, the two things that you can do is have a look at the diet, check that it is a whole foods ketogenic diet with plenty of fat. The next thing that you would do then is potentially give your body longer burning its own body fat by using something like intermittent fasting. Okie dokie. So we will move on then. This brings me on actually to intermittent fasting. First of all, I know we've got a few people watching now. Is there anyone here who is familiar with fasting or has a particular way that they like to do it? Or is anyone out there thinking, you must be joking, there's no way I'm going to fast? Oh, fat adapted. Yeah, no problem. I'll explain that Oh, hi, Lynn. Yes, you. Yeah. How's it going, Lynn? Are you doing well? Right. Okay. I'll cover these two things here. Okay, so first of all, fat adapted. So what I mean by that is when you're at that point where you feel no difference between burning dietary fat and body fat. Basically, it's when you eat a meal and 8 hours after that meal, you still feel energetic. You have no drops in your energy levels. You have no hunger. And you actually have to think to yourself, right, in order for me to get my calories in for the day, I do have to eat again. When you're having those sorts of thoughts, you are fat adapted. Your body is literally going from dietary fat into burning body fat with no drops in energy levels or blood sugar at all. You're completely unaware of it, and that's fat adaptation. Basically, your body is in a position where you can fast easily, and that's the main way of knowing that you're fat adapted. That the hunger's gone, and you literally feel like you could go on forever, because your energy level is high. So that would be fat adaptation there. Okie dokie. So, can you drink Kiss coffee while fasting? No, Sherry. Kiss coffee is massively high in fat and calories, and is definitely not for fasting. Fasting is on 0 calories, so it would just be water, black coffee, black tea, that sort of thing. I normally break my fast either with bone broth or a Kiss coffee, but it is definitely breaking a fast. It's got a huge metabolic effect, and it's definitely eating, not fasting. I hope that answers that one. Yes, pretty good. Every other day, 24 hours. Yeah, fantastic, Lynn. I'm really interested to see what comes out of it, because if nothing else, then the autophagy that you're experiencing is incredible. So I expect that that you'll start to experience some really good results there. What can we take during IF? Well, because you're still eating plenty during your feeding window, Nadia, during your fast, it's just water and coffee and tea, really. I fast from about 6 o'clock in the evening when I finish my last meal, and then till about mid-morning the next day. So, for example, this evening I've got a glass of water with me. Tomorrow morning I'll have a black coffee when I wake up, and then I'll drink water until about 11 o'clock when I break my fast. So I'm still getting all my calories, I'm still having all my food, I'm still having all my my electrolytes and everything else during the day. So I don't really need anything when fasting, just a sip of water and things like that, and a black coffee to wake me up in the morning, but that's it. If you're thinking about more than a sort of 24-hour fast, then again, you're thinking about things like your electrolytes, which would be important at that point to start making sure that you had your salts and things. But yeah, nothing really for a short fast like that. Yeah, absolutely, Aisha. And dry fasting it's not something that I'm very aware of. However, from my understanding, when you dry fast, the autophagy that the body does, this breaking down of cells, is increased even more. And that's because cells are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and the body can actually break down the proteins and the parts of the cell to make its own water. So over that 24-hour period, if you do go into slight dehydration, the body starts creating its own water by breaking down old and decaying cells. It's absolutely incredible. And I think there's a lot of cultures and a lot of religions, like you explained, where actually fasting is part of that culture. And there's a huge health benefit to it as well. And we know that people have been fasting, whether it be for religious purposes, cultural purposes, or health purposes, since basically the dawn of history. Since people have been able to write, they've written about fasting for health. So we do know that this is a tradition that goes back a long, long way. Okay, yeah, 12 and 5. Yeah, absolutely, Sherry. The more hours that we spend not eating, the more hours we spend burning our own body fat. And let's be fair, for the majority of people in the group, that's the name of the game, isn't it? You want to be burning your body fat when we're eating, that's not the case. We're going to burn dietary fat when we're eating. So it's what we do when we're not eating, is when we're losing weight. Okie dokie. Kiss coffee. Nadia, Kiss coffee is, you probably heard of bulletproof coffee. Well, Kiss coffee is just our version. And instead of MCT oil, we just use coconut oil, because MCT oil is refined. So on a whole foods ketogenic diet, we try to keep things as natural as we can. So we use coconut oil and we call it Kiss coffee. It's coconut oil, butter, double cream or heavy cream as you call it in the US, and some strong black coffee. We shake it up or blend it. It's absolutely beautiful, but it's in the files if you want to see it. What is safe number of hours to fast? Cheryl, we know that people have fasted 300 plus days. So I think once you get into prolonged fast, once we're looking past 24 hours, what I would recommend is looking into the sorts of things that you need to do to support your fast. So you're thinking about your electrolytes, you're thinking about how much water you're drinking, things like that. So we know that there's very, very little risk to a healthy person fasting. But I would say that if you're thinking about fasting, and it's certainly something a lot of people who are ketogenic start doing naturally at first, and then maybe they start taking it more seriously. But yeah, if you're going to go more than 24 hours, you need to start thinking about replacing your electrolytes and things like that. However, there's lots of people who are doing extended fasts. From what I understand, at sort of 48 hours, the autophagy in the body is at its peak. It then starts to come down slightly after that. So you could say that if you just want to maximize the autophagy, then you're looking around the 48-hour mark. But there's lots of people who do much longer fasts than that safely. Ultimately, if you're carrying excess weight, then you've got enough fuel to keep you going for a long, long time. And I mean months. So it's not that's the concern. It's what you would be looking at is the micronutrients instead, because you have enough energy, but you need to make sure that you're replacing things like your electrolytes and your vitamins and things like that. So if you're looking at extended fasts, then I would definitely recommend reading about it. And there's a fantastic book by Dr. Jason Fung called A Complete Guide to Fasting, and it takes you through intermittent fasting, which is something I do, to alternate day fasting, which Lynn is doing, and it also talks about more long-term fasts as well. So definitely loads of information out there, but I would say if you're going to think about longer fasts than 24 hours, then maybe you're going to think about your electrolytes and how you're going to replace those without the food. Okie dokie, where did we get to? I love to eat too much. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, you know, when it's early days and you haven't reached that sort of fat adaptation stage, the idea of fasting is kind of strange. However, for those of us who have been fat adapted for quite a while, it does actually come quite naturally after a while. And you know, it's waiting for those natural body cues to say, actually, we're okay. You can stop eating now. So wait, and it'll come. It'll come. Yeah. Never ever eat like. Okay. So Aisha, what would happen if we went back? Well, I can tell you exactly what would happen because I did it about a month ago. I spent 3 weeks in India, traveling around and staying with families, and when you're staying with South Indian families and the vast majority or pretty much all they've got to give you to eat is rice, I can tell you exactly what happened. First of all, I had severe digestive distress, spent 18 days not able to go far from a toilet, wasn't great at all. So occasionally, you can, well, we're all adults, we can eat whatever we like. However, what will happen if you do have a high carb meal is you will come out of ketosis. So you will take probably, depending on how much carbs you eat, from hours to days to get back into that ketogenic state. During that time, you will stop burning body fat, so you won't lose weight. But it's more to do with the inflammation and the fact that our bodies become quite intolerant to carbohydrate, and we actually feel quite unwell. So it's going to be very individual for each person. But for me, I've become really intolerant to it. My gut no longer digests carbohydrates very well. So I wasn't very well when I went back. But for me, there is no going back to a high carb lifestyle, because the reason I'm eating like this is I had type 2 diabetes. So I know that I'm a high risk if I was to ever go back to high carb. But we're all adults. I know there's people here who aren't eating ketogenic 100% of the time. However, personally, I love the way I feel in ketosis. I really enjoy my food, the ketogenic food, and I don't wish to feel bloated, sluggish, have that mental fog and all the things that went with the carbohydrates. So it's completely personal choice. But just know that obviously if you are going to have a high carb meal, it kicks you out of ketosis and it takes some time to get back in. So that's it really. It's completely up to you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We do become intolerant to some of the things. Yeah, absolutely. We've just become more sensitive to them. Yeah, absolutely. It is very much a lifestyle. And I think once you've been on the other side, you've regained your health, you've achieved the sort of fit, lean body that you always wanted. It's very difficult to see a reason to actually go back to how you were eating. Yeah, I know. I find it really tricky as well. I'm the only keto eater in my house, so I do completely get that it's really difficult to watch other people eat. All we can do is be role models. All we can do is explain to people why we eat as we do. Adults will all make their own decisions, and all we can do for our children is try to provide some options for them that are lower in sugar. Okay. Okay, so we actually covered the answer to your question a little bit earlier in the video. Basically, the way that we eat keto without counting is that we focus 100% on the actual type of food that we're going to eat. So we fill our fridges and our shopping trolleys and our lunch boxes with ketogenic food. We always aim to add fats. We always aim to have a moderate protein, and we always aim to eat low carb vegetables. And that's the way we do it. The way that we don't need to moderate our calorie intake is that our body naturally does that. However, in the modern diet, things like sweeteners, MSG, flavorings, preservatives, these sorts of things impact our ability to eat only what we want and what we need. They actually stimulate appetite. The food industry does this on purpose. When we remove the processed foods, the carbs, the sugars, and the sweeteners, and I'm even talking about natural sweeteners and berries and everything that's sweet, once you remove those things from the diet, then the body will naturally moderate how many calories that you take in. And I think all you've got to do is ask the people who've been doing this a while whether they feel they can moderate the calories that's going into their body, and they'll say yes, they can, because they eat when they're hungry, they stop when they're full, and they don't get hungry again until the body is actually hungry. So that's the way that we do it. I did cover it, so I won't go all the way through it, but that's the main thing. It's not about how much we're eating, it's literally about what we are eating, the quality of the food. And that's what allows us to eat instinctively on the KISS plan. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm all for people using apps if they want to. I'm just saying there is no need. So once you get your head around the ratios of how much fat to protein we're looking for on a plate, and of course you can use the KISS plate for that. But once you've got your your head around what it looks like, it does get much easier. But I always say to people, if you're having to read a label, then you're not eating a whole food. So, you know, that's something to be aware of. If you're reading lots of labels, then you are still eating a lot of processed food, and that will stop you from being able to eat instinctively and not overeat. So just be aware of that. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Sherry, and I'm exactly the same. You know, you probably all saw my breakfast this morning, my bacon and egg sandwich. It was massive, and I couldn't finish it either, and that was it then until this evening when we had chicken dinner. So so yeah, completely different to how I used to eat. But yeah, it's the natural appetite suppressant of the high fat food and the ketosis in working together there. Okie dokie. So I was going to go on to intermittent fasting very quickly, just before we sort of wrap up. So intermittent fasting then is when we start to reduce the number of hours during the day that we actually consume calories. So we can do that by keeping our calories within an 8-hour window, and then we can move that down. So if you can imagine, you're starting at an 8-hour window, which would be breakfast at 9 a.m. and then finish your last meal by 5 p.m. Or wherever you want your 8-hour window to be. And then you can squeeze that window smaller and smaller. Personally, I find a 4 to 6 hour window absolutely fine these days, but I did start off at 8 hours. What that does is it gives you 16 hours or more a day of burning body fat. And obviously when it comes to weight loss, burning body fat is what you want to be doing. We won't burn body fat while there's any insulin in the body. We won't burn body fat when there's lots of dietary fat floating around. So we do actually have to spend time not eating for the weight loss to happen. So it's really important that one of the key things that we do is that we're not snacking throughout the day, and we're actually spending as much time as we can not eating. It does mean that we have to feast a little bit. We need to have those big meals, high fat meals, to keep our metabolism high. But intermittent fasting is something that you can definitely look into. You can either intermittent fast by just having food windows during the day. The other way of doing it is something called alternate day fasting, where you'd eat one day normally whenever you like, and then not eat the next day, and then go back to eating normally the day after. So there's different ways of doing it. Personally, I found it quite easy to start off with an 8-hour window and then gradually move those windows, the start and end of that window together. Okay, supplements. So first of all, Nadia, other than magnesium, I don't take any supplements. I take magnesium because I find it really difficult to get from my food, and I seem to be quite low in it, because one thing that I do experience when I don't take magnesium is leg cramps and things like that. So I am quite deficient in magnesium. Sorry, I could grab my water. So I don't take any other supplements. If you are taking supplements, then I would suggest to try, if they have a calorie involvement, for example, if you're taking omega-3 fats and things like that, then I would do it inside that eating window, because you don't want any calories during your fast. It breaks the fast. So I would say if you're taking supplements, take them with your meals. But things like magnesium is not going to, it's not going to break a fast unless it's got lots of starchy fillers and things. Yeah, Jackie, some people, hi, by the way, some people really struggle with dairy. Personally, it doesn't seem to have any impact on me at all. I don't seem to be intolerant of it. However, that's not the case for everyone. And I also know that the dairy that we have in the UK is very different to the dairy elsewhere. Our dairy is grass-fed. It's less likely to have lots of growth hormones in it, and it's less likely to have lots of antibiotics. Our cows are not kept in close proximity to each other. They're kept on grass, and and you know, dairy for us is not necessarily the same as dairy everywhere. So I am acutely aware of that. So what I would say to people is, if you are still feeling that there's inflammation in the body, if you're not experiencing the sort of weight loss that you would like to, and you've tried all my other sort of top tips about looking at your food, and looking at your windows and your processed food and things, then yeah, why not spend a week or so trialing no dairy? Because a lot of people who are intolerant to wheat and gluten can be intolerant to the casein protein in milk as well, and in dairy products. So for me, I thought it would be an issue because I'm incredibly intolerant to wheat. However, I don't seem to have had any issues with dairy, and have continued to lose all my weight with quite a high amount of dairy in my diet. But that's not the same for everybody. So I would say that if you think dairy is the issue, then just try a couple of weeks without and see the difference. It could be something that causes inflammation in your body, maybe not. But processed foods definitely is an issue, and I'm afraid to say I don't see any excuse to have to eat them. I work full time. Well, I have several jobs. This is one of them. The other one is a full-time job as well. I've got children. I've got a husband. I run a house, and I still don't have to eat any processed food whatsoever. So I think that ditching the processed food, especially anything that's got flavorings in it or sweeteners and dodgy oil, all the inflammatory stuff, is one of the best things you can ever do for yourself. And when you eat better, the whole family eats better as well. So I think that getting rid of the processed foods is an amazing thing that we can all do. It's great for our health, and it has a real impact on weight loss as well. The body really starts to release body fat and go back to its natural, healthy, lean state when you get rid of all that toxic and inflammatory food. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, Dr. Fung, yeah, I get where he's coming from in that it's going to have a very small insulin response because there's not a lot of carbs in heavy cream. However, from what I understand of the studies around autophagy, is that the less calories we can have during our fasted state, the more autophagy that we're going to have, and the more human growth hormone that we're going to stimulate. So I get that as a crutch, you could use a little bit of heavy cream during your fast. However, for me, what I did was gradually increase my fast instead, rather than using crutches during the time. So yeah, so now I can fast without double cream, and for me, the whole reason I'm fasting is to get the absolute maximum benefits out of that period of time. So I will choose to do whatever I can to maximize the effect, I guess. But yeah, there's lots of different ways of doing it. I've seen people do fat fasts, so they're just using things like coconut oil during their fast and things like that. And again, that's another way of doing it. However, from my reading, my decision is to do 0 calories during that time and keep all my calories for when I break my fast. The coffee with cream at 11 o'clock tastes even better. Yeah. Okay, so I got one more question that I can cover, I think. I've got 7 minutes left. If you've got any comments, questions, or anything else, please do drop them in the comments. I can see them and I will answer. So the last 3 things then. Someone asked me to cover constipation, headache, and sleep. All 3 of those issues are electrolyte imbalances, and basically can be quite simply cured. Headaches tend to be a lack of sodium, and the way to improve sodium in the diet is to salt your food. So you can use things like pink Himalayan salt, or sea salt, grey salt, sort of dirty salt, on your food to improve the amount of sodium in the diet. That can really help with headaches. Constipation tends to be to do with magnesium deficiency, and you can use magnesium citrate to treat that really well. Believe it or not, adding lots of high fiber foods may actually make your constipation worse. So if you are constipated, then have a look at magnesium citrate, and that should sort you out in a couple of days. The other thing is sleep. Again, there's two things. First of all, ketones do give us that amazing energy, and they do give us that mental clarity that can keep us awake at night. And it also gives us really vivid dreams. So there's only so much I can do about that, because people want to be in ketosis when they're on the ketogenic diet. But we can help improve it, again, by using things like magnesium and potassium, calcium and sodium. So again, it's all to do with electrolytes and minerals. And I do take magnesium, and it does help with sleep. So I would definitely say, if you've got any of those three common issues, it's actually to do with electrolyte imbalance rather than anything else. So once you get your electrolytes sorted, and again, we're only taking enough to relieve symptoms. We're not going overboard with these things, because we should get a lot of it from the diet that we're eating. But, you know, if you want to treat symptoms, then those are the sorts of things that you can do. Okay, anything else? Sometimes get very, yeah. Okay, so Nadia, it will depend, really. Sometimes it's difficult to know, really, without knowing exactly what you're eating. But some people can have intolerances to certain vegetables. I know a lot of people go quite heavy on the veg, particularly things like kale and broccoli and things like that. For me, the cruciferous vegetables make me feel very bloated and give me quite bad indigestion as well. Potentially it's that. But it's difficult to know, really, without sort of knowing exactly what you're eating and drinking. But some people, again, if you are taking magnesium, maybe the dosage is a little bit high, potentially, or the other main culprit is MCT. If people are taking MCT oil, which I personally don't do, but if you are taking MCTs, then that can have that effect as well. Can give you loose stools. So those are potentially some of the reasons. And if it is MCT oil that you are taking, then just switch over to coconut oil and it'll stop. And you'll still get all those MCTs from your coconut oil instead. So yeah, that's as far as I got in terms of questions. So, and I think we're just bang on for time as well. So I'll give you guys 30 seconds just to give me any more questions before we go. Do we have to take lemon and pink salt every day? I don't. I salt my food. Lemon juice is great for reducing potential kidney stones and things like that. However, again, it's not something I particularly do. So it's completely personal choice, really. That's completely up to you. Apple cider vinegar, again, personal choice. I don't. A lot of people do. There are reasons that people do it. However, I'm quite minimalist, and I eat a really good diet. I eat probiotics. I eat whole foods. I don't actually need anything. I'm really healthy, so I eat a wide variety of foods. However, I do understand there are people who like their apple cider vinegar, and they can continue to use it. It's no problem. It's keto friendly, and it's completely personal choice. Yeah, you probably realise by now I'm quite a simple keto eater. So for me, I like to just eat my food and get on with my life, because I think we can. You know, it's about balance, isn't it? And finding what's right for us in terms of our life. But whatever works for people is fine. But for me, I just eat greens, meat, fat, dairy, and just carry on with life. And it seems to be going well so far. So. Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully lots of people agree with us and come and join the group and start to enjoy a slightly more sustainable and enjoyable ketogenic lifestyle, because we shouldn't be fighting against our bodies. We should be really enjoying it. Oh, thank you, Jackie. That's lovely of you to say. Well, I really enjoy being in the group. I love it to bits, in fact, and I'm really hoping that everything works out and we have a fantastic launch of the plan and of the members group. And, you know, ultimately, I would love to be able to do what I do for more people for more of the week. I want to ditch the office job, and I want to do this full time with people, because I think that I get so much reward from it, and I hope that you know, everyone else gets loads from it as well, and I just want to keep going with it. So yeah, so make sure that you're telling everybody about us. Get everybody in. The bigger we grow, the more time I can spend with you guys, and the less time I have to spend in an office doing really mundane things. So, okie dokie. I'm going to leave you now because it's an hour in. So, love to you all. Stay strong. Keep going. Please keep me up to date with all your progress. And I forgot, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. Yeah, okay. See you soon. Love to you all, and good night.